All right, so now I'd like to now that we've been through all the mechanisms, you'll see that your problem set 5 makes you practice basically all the enzyme names, all the structures of the citric acid cycle and all the mechanisms. But what I want to do now is sort of take a 30,000-foot view and remind ourselves of just what has happened since we got through glucose. And then we're going to do just a little bit of math to figure out how many molecules of ATP you have to make every day to keep yourself alive. And it will be astronomical. So first, glucose. All right. In glycolysis, glucose gives us what? Overall, what are the final products of glucose? Starting with energy-rich molecules. How many ATP do you get out of glucose? 2. You get 4 overall, but you had to invest 2 in the beginning. So net 2 ATP. How many NADHs do you get? 2. And it only happens in one step. The one step where you generate NADH is oxidation of glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate to 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate. That happens twice because for every molecule of glucose you get 2 glyceraldehydes. So we get 2 NADHs, okay? And then we get 2 pyruvates. 2 pyruvate, that's fine. All right, so that's first. Second, for each molecule of pyruvate, when we do the pyruvate dehydrogenase complex, how many NADHs do we generate for 1 pyruvate?
1.
It's just 1, yep. 1 per pyruvate, and then we also generate acetyl-CoA. Now, since we're talking about relative to glucose, I'm going to put a 2 here, since 1 glucose leads to 2 pyruvate. 2 pyruvate leads to 2 NADHs and 2 acetyl-CoAs. And then in the citric acid cycle, an acetyl-CoA generates what? Remember? How many NADHs do we get? Go back and look at the citric acid cycle. You get 1 here in the oxidation of isocitrate to alpha ketoglutarate. You get another here in the oxidative decarboxylation of alpha ketoglutarate. And you get a final NADH here in the oxidation of malate to oxaloacetate. So that's 3, good. How many FADHs? Just 1. That's involved in just one step, the oxidation of succinate to fumarate. And then we also get 1 GTP, which we're going to consider basically equivalent to ATP. All right? And to keep things balanced, we had 2 acetyl-CoA, so it should actually be 6 NADHs, 2 FADH2s, and 2 GTPs. All right, so let's tally everything up. Glucose leads to all the way through the citric acid cycle. Oh, and I should say at the end, we're going to get 2 CO2s here and 4 CO2s here. So the process of metabolizing glucose all the way through the citric acid cycle is going to give us, let's see, 2 ATPs and 2 GTPs. So I'm going to count that as 4 ATP total because 1 GTP equals 1 ATP. Then how many NADHs? Let's see, 2, 4, 10? Did I miss any? Check my arithmetic. And then 2 FADH2s. So now we can apply the conversion factor from the electron transport chain that for every NADH, we get 2.5 ATP. So that would be 25 ATP from NADH. And then 1.5 per FADH2. Have I missed anything? 2 times 1.5 is 3. So overall, the total yield of ATP for 1 molecule of glucose is 32 ATP. Okay? So later on, as we're doing some math to figure out how much glucose you'd need to eat per day if that was all you were surviving on, and then how much ATP you can make from that, our conversion factor is 1 molecule of glucose equals 32 molecules of ATP. Okay, so people that have some food science and nutrition background, about how many calories does, I don't want to say an average American like me consume a day, but I just want to say a human on average, how many calories on average does a human need? 2,000 is a good rule of thumb. All right, good. So we're going to start with that. Now, the calories that we talk about when we are talking about food are capital C calories. That's actually equal to 2,000 kilocalories, little c's. Okay? So an average human needs 2,000 kilocalories. Now, that energy is going to come in the form of ATP, being the driving force for various reactions. And a good rule of thumb for how much ATP is going to drive a reaction forward is just to estimate the change in free energy, average change in free energy for ATP hydrolysis. ATP hydrolysis is basically you take ATP plus water and you get ADP and then phosphate. And the free energy for that reaction is about anywhere between, it depends on the conditions of the cell, concentrations of stuff, anywhere between -7 to -15 kilocalories per mole. I'm a scientist, so I like a range of values. I like to know what the uncertainty is. Okay, so with this number, with these numbers, we can calculate how many moles of ATP, average number of moles of ATP consumed by a human. And I'm not going to make you do that math in your head. I've already done it here on the sheet. You basically would take this number 2,000 and divide it by this number, and that will give you the number of moles of ATP. So one estimate would be, a conservative estimate would be 130 moles of ATP. That's 2,000 divided by 7. Anywhere all the way up to about 300 moles of ATP if you divide 2,000 by 15. Okay? So 130 to 300 moles of ATP. Now, do you know how big a mole is? 6 times 10 to the 23rd. So you would need anywhere from 8 to 12 times 10 to the 25th molecules of ATP every day. All right? So that's just an astronomical number. That's probably more molecules of ATP every day. And let's do that. 6, anywhere between 8 to 12 times 10 to the 25 molecules of ATP. Just to put that in perspective, conservative estimates of the number of grains of sand on Earth are range from like 10 to the 22 to 10 to the 23. So you would need to use 100 to 1,000 Earth's worth grains of sand of ATP. Does that blow your mind? Okay. We got more mind blowing to do here, because not only is that an astronomical amount of ATP, but it's actually in vast excess to how much ATP you have in you, okay? So to calculate this, we can ask how much ATP is in the average human. To do this, you need to know the average concentration of ATP in a human, and it ends up being 3 to, I'll just make it simple, 0.003 to 0.004 moles per liter. And then you need to know the average volume of a human. To calculate this, you need to get in a swimming pool that is full all the way up to the top, and then you need someone to collect all the water that is displaced when you submerge yourself, and then you can calculate your volume. Or you can be in one of those bod pods that does it through a different calculation. But in any case, the average human volume is, we're going to say 42 liters. So put that together. That's a Gen Chem math that you could do, but I'm not going to make you do. That ends up being anywhere from, depending on the concentration of ATP in your cells at a given time, anywhere from 126 to 168. No, I said that wrong. Anywhere from 0.126 to 0.168 moles of ATP in you. Okay, you need that much ATP per day. You're going to use that much ATP per day. You only have this much in you. Wait, what? All right. Just to put it into perspective, this amount of ATP that you need to use per day would be 66 to 152 kilograms of ATP. Now, most humans, that's like your body weight in that range, right? So, and you obviously are not 100% ATP. So what's going on here is that your body must recycle your entire store of ATP molecules anywhere between 1,000 to 2,000 times a day to keep you alive. That means a single molecule of ATP does its thing, and then it goes back to the electron transport chain, picks up another phosphate, and off to the races again. And that's got to happen 1,000 to 2,000 times a day just to keep you alive. Isn't nature awesome? Like, you're just sitting there bored, and you're that poor little ATP molecule just racing around. So that may help you appreciate how fast nature is, but what a beautiful creation our bodies are. And just as an aside, you have a lot of messages that are pointed at you today with respect to the human body. It's weird. We're taught at the same time from the same Instagram influencers and advertising agencies and various things to both worship the human body and hate it, and all for the wrong reasons. And this is a miraculous creation of God that does amazing things. Like, can you imagine building a machine that could be used 1,000 times a day and never need any maintenance? It's like just sort of crazy. I mean, I guess we do need maintenance. We need to eat. We need to sleep. But it's not like anybody ever shows up and says, "Boy, we really need to check your ATP phosphorylation." It just happens, because if it doesn't, you'd be dead. So anyway, pretty amazing stuff. By the way, if you wanted to get, based on this calculation of 1 glucose molecule per 32 ATP, we can tell you how much glucose you would need we're going to convert these numbers, moles of ATP needed to be used by a human in a day, to moles of glucose. And that ends up being around 4 to 9 moles of glucose. You just divide 130 or 300 by 32. And then if you want to know what mass of glucose that would be, if you wanted to just eat glucose, I don't recommend it, 0.7 to 1.7 kilograms. So that's a lot of sugar. Well, that's a lot of glucose. Anyway. Couple other things. Let's remind ourselves of the role of vitamins in this process. Remember that NAD plus and NADH involve nicotinamide, which is vitamin B3. Let's see, coenzyme A involves something called pantothenic acid, is a portion of coenzyme A, and that's vitamin B5. And there were some others. Oh yeah, the pyruvate dehydrogenase complex and the citric acid cycle both involve TPP, which is vitamin B1. And then lastly, I think the last one is FAD going to FADH requires vitamin B2. So these are all the spots where key vitamins are important in metabolism. And there are others, but these are the main ones that are involved in glucose metabolism. And this is why you need them too, because they're required for this process and your body can't make them. Okay, any other questions?
This is kind of out of curiosity.
Sure.
But when you're old and you have energy, how does that affect your ATP? Is it important to less?
That's a great question. What is, is this related to aging? Like when you're old and dying and you're tired? Are you saying something about me? Do I look old and tired? Yeah. That's how I feel. I'm not on my deathbed now, but I am old and tired. Yeah, so I don't know. That's a great question. People study aging and what changes. As to what fails, I don't know that it's any individual metabolic process that fails. I think it's more systems. I'm not sure. Some of my colleagues here in the biochemistry area, like J.C. Price, study changes to your proteome, that is changes to your proteins as you age. And a current hypothesis is that as you age, your body's ability to deal with misfolded or unfolded protein, recycle it, and generate new protein starts to not be able to keep up with demand. So there's some indication that that's involved in aging. But we're now way out. Anything more I could say would be just speculation. I mean, so now I'll just go to President Nelson, who I think years ago said, it's actually a blessing that our lives are finite. We're here for our mortal experience, and then it comes to an end. The world is great, but we would hate to be stuck here forever. So I don't know. There are other people who are actively working on immortality and trying to figure out how to delay aging forever, which is kind of interesting. But I'm not gonna freeze my head when I die, so I'm not holding up for anything. Okay, what else? Yeah.
Does your body create excess ATP or does it stay as glucose until?
That's an interesting question. So does it stay as Does it stay as ATP, or does it make excess ATP, or does it stay as glucose? I don't totally know the biology. I know that ATP is highly negatively charged. It probably has a hard time getting across the cell membrane, is just what I'm thinking. So ATP is made inside the cell in mitochondria, so I think each cell makes its own ATP. The fuel that's shuttled around in your blood is glucose primarily. Other cells, we're going to talk now, this is a great transition, we're going to talk now about what your body does with triglycerides. Many cell types can get energy from triglycerides. I believe I read that your brain cells can't. Your brain needs glucose. And I don't know whether that's true or not. So somebody who's taken cell bio, I'm seeing some nods, yeah. Somebody who's taken cell bio can check. But what that means is that in times where your blood sugar is low, it's really dangerous for your brain. So your body will actually run glycolysis backwards to make glucose to get in your blood to feed your brain. Other cells can live off triglycerides because we're going to see triglycerides are going to make acetyl-CoA, and as soon as you make that, boom, 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 citric acid cycle, and you can make more ATP. So you can transport triglycerides in your blood, but there's a good reason not to have too many in your blood because that can lead to atherosclerosis, which we'll talk about later. Yep. Yeah, go ahead.
We just talked about in this class at all anaerobic metabolism, how NADH will drop off that hydride.
Yeah, so we can mention that actually right now, anaerobic metabolism. So organisms that lack mitochondria, or you when you're not when you're not breathing enough oxygen. So we haven't talked. We're missing a few pieces of the puzzle. One of them is the electron transport chain. I'm gonna talk about triglyceride metabolism next, and then we'll get to the electron transport chain. But just as a preview, this business of NADH leading to ATP is in mitochondria. NADH deliver hydrogen and the 2 electrons, or hydride, to the electron transport chain, and that changes NADH to NAD+, and then it can go redo metabolism again. Those electrons flow down the electron transport chain. They ultimately reduce oxygen to water. They drive a proton gradient that powers an ATP synthase, and that's how the ATP is made. So you need not only NADH, but you need oxygen to power ATP synthesis. If you're doing aerobic metabolism, all the ATP you're getting is from glycolysis, which is 2, right? Not a lot. And so, and for every one of those, you got to consume, for every molecule of ATP, you got to consume a molecule of NAD+. And if you run out of NAD+, then you're in trouble. Of course, the way the human body regenerates NAD+ is just by breathing in the electron transport chain. If you don't have that going on, one of the things that you can do is you take NADH plus pyruvate, which is this, and you do a reduction reaction where NADH delivers a hydride to the ketone, and you end up with the secondary alcohol. And this is called lactate, or lactic acid. And so if you're needing to replenish your stores of NAD+ to get more ATP out of glycolysis, then one of the ways your body can do that is by generating lactate. It's a temporary measure. Accumulation of lactic acid in muscle is associated with pain. And you want to breathe deeply then, and all you're doing there is recycling a bunch of NADH, so you don't have to make as much lactate anymore. Okay, what else? Yeah.
What determines like how fast like these metabolic processes happen? Because I know everybody has like a different metabolism rate. So
Interesting, yeah. What determines how fast these metabolic processes happen? What is, people talk about my metabolism is slow. What do they mean by that? I don't know, and I'm not sure they do. I think because now we're talking at the level of organs and systems, and we could talk about various processes that cause glucose to be stored either as glycogen or as triglycerides. We could talk about triglyceride synthesis. If you have too much acetyl-CoA, you synthesize triglycerides, and then that gets stored. And the insulin and glucagon biology is something that I don't remember very well from my biochemistry class, so I have nothing useful to tell you there, other than that controls a lot of how much glucose is in your blood, whether it gets absorbed by the cell or not. So what can affect rates of reactions? Well, number of enzymes that each cell has, how much that enzyme is expressed, and then how fast those enzymes are. These processes are tightly regulated, so I think I mentioned in glycolysis, the first two steps, or the first two and the last step, are irreversible, and those steps are tightly regulated. There's some feedback loops where if you have, say, not enough glucose, anyway, I'm not even intelligent enough to describe it, but basically the enzymes are regulated to respond to your body's needs. If you need, if you've got a lot of glucose and you need to do something with it, then glycolysis turns on. If you don't, then it turns off, and so on. I maybe said that backwards too, because you would think if you got a ton of glucose, maybe your body's like, we're fine. We don't need to go crazy on glycolysis. So I'm sorry, I don't know that at that level of detail. All right, what else? I'm not going to offer extra credit for every time my answer is I don't know, because that would be most of the time. Okay. Well, we could start in on triglycerides, because we got 20 minutes, but it's also an exam day, so we're going to call it. And we'll start in on fatty acid beta oxidation and triglyceride metabolism tomorrow. Good luck on the test.